I won't work with everyone, and I've been asked by some very well-known people, but I won't work with them. It's not about the money necessarily. It's because sometimes people in America want to know who London's life coach is. That's my title. And they want to be able to say to somebody, well, I've worked with London's life coach, just for an egotistical thing. But also I condone violence against women and men. I don't condone violence at all. But if I know myself that they have that attribute that they bring forward, that they're aggressive or passive aggressive or manipulative or narcissistic, I won't work with them regardless of. I had an MBA player that offered me 3 times as much as I'm normally paid. And I said no, because I know that he didn't respect women at all. And having been a victim of domestic violence and manipulative conversations with people, I didn't want to put myself in that position, but also I try not to have that kind of toxic energy around me. I believe that, you know, your frequency is lowered when you're around those people.
And also Nina the Brit.
Nina the Brit, do you know what? I'm a very British person. As much as I shouldn't be, I don't connect with my own culture because obviously I'm just detached myself. Maybe mentally it was a survival thing. I don't know, but I completely detached myself, and I quite like Nina the Brit because most of my clients are Americans. And it's actually Francis Ngannou who gave me that name.
Was it really?
Oh, you're Nina the Brit, the British. So I just kind of liked it, and I just think the way people see you is the way you should probably go
for sure. I think we have to start there. How you got the name Nina the Brit. to dive into that story just briefly, because that's fascinating. That's just a brilliant little insight to drop in there.
So when I first became homeless after leaving a domestic violence situation, my accommodation eventually became a lady's house. She'd opened her doors to us and we lived there with her children. But when her children would come back from universities, it felt a little bit like we were in the way. She'd never made us feel that way, but I felt that way. So I would go to my daughter's 1-bedroom flat in Bermondsey, not far from where we are. She was studying at King's, she was doing dentistry. And I would often just go for a wander at night because I had this newfound freedom. And I went to a networking event. Somebody was trying to help me get a PA job. I don't think I would have lasted. But I ended up having a few drinks because they were, you know, I was telling people it was his birthday and I was drinking his drink, finding a means to an end. And I was stood outside this bar because there was a fire. So we all had to leave. Fire engine turned up. And I was very childlike. I am childlike. You know, now I kind of almost feel I'm reliving my childhood and teens, and probably annoys everybody, but I have that tendency. And I climbed into the fire engine because I wanted to see the fire engine, and the guy was fine. He was like, yeah, come in. I said, I'm Nina. He was like, come in, Nina. But then he asked me to leave and I was like, but I want to do, what does this do? What does, you know, I was like a real little kid. And somebody opened the door and literally lifted me out and put me down. And I turned around, it was this 6'4" tall, massive guy. And I said, don't be touching me. You can't be touching me. He said, no, really politely, very polite, said, no, I'm helping you down. And then I turned around and there was all of these fighters. And you could tell they were fighters because of the way they looked. I knew nothing about them. My son does Muay Thai. He's, you know, a huge fan of some of these people. I didn't know. And they said something and I answered it in a very diplomatic way because I think she said something very negative about herself. And I said, no, don't say that. How about you say it this way? And I spent from 7 p.m. with about 15 of these UFC fighters and MMA fighters until 11 the next morning. My daughter's wondering where the hell I am because my train to go back was due and she's thinking, the bag's here, no, she's not here. I've been up since 5 revising. Where's my mum gone? She was quite concerned. And I had just sat there and just gone through literally each person and their trauma and recognize it, because I think when you've been through so much trauma, you recognize it. And he said, oh, what's your name? And I said, oh, what's your name? And he said, oh, my name's Francis. And they were like, don't you know who he is? And I said, no, because to me, I like to take people as they are. I don't like to read up about anybody. I don't like to presume there's somebody that social media or anybody has told me. I take them as face value and what they present. And he said, well, you're Nina the Brit and I'm Francis. And I said, and he had a French accent. So I said, you're French Francis. And then later on, he found me on Instagram and I changed my name from Nina to Nina _ the Brit. And it was because he named me this name, but they all wanted to work with me. And then he flew me over to France and we had, you know, a drink and things, something to eat. And he just said that I made so much sense. And it wasn't that long that he'd been homeless himself.
Wow.
And had been spotted by somebody who'd taken him into boxing. And boxing was a huge thing in France.
Wow.
And he was waiting to be signed up by the UFC in America. At that time,
wow.
He wasn't quite there. And we just started talking. We became really good friends. And anytime he needed something, he would always say, what would Nina do?
That's
and he
incredible.
would give me a call. And then we became, obviously, I said to him at one point, look, I'm still homeless, trying to sort myself out. I said, if I'm coaching you, how about you pay me? And he said, I'm going to pay you, because he had the means too.
Yeah.
And then I would hear back and forth from him, and he would contact me when things sometimes didn't go his way, when he was losing and he was going over to Asia to fight. He was asking if I would go, and I said, you don't need me, because the problem is with a lot of fighters, boxers, football players, when they're training, they've got a strike coach, they've got the physiotherapist, they've got someone telling them where to stand, how to eat. And when they get in that cage, or when they're on the pitch is slightly different because they're part of a team, but especially for fighters, they're on their own. And suddenly that self-belief just disappears.
Yeah.
And it's a case of self-sabotage. Should I be here? And until the fight starts to go their way, they have a real negative mindset. And then after the fight, there's a negative mindset, because they've worked towards this thing. There's nothing there then. They've won or they've lost, and then it's all very downhill. They're not cutting weight. They're not watching what they're doing. And it really affects a person's mental health.
Have you worked with any fighters that you found particularly difficult? And you don't need to name names, but just any fighters that you've had a sense and a feeling of, this is just impossible?
I won't work with everyone. And I've been asked by some very well-known people, but I won't work with them. It's not about the money necessarily. It's because sometimes people in America want to know who London's life coach is. That's my title. And they want to be able to say to somebody, well, I've worked with London's life coach, just for an egotistical thing. But also I condone violence against women and men. I don't condone violence at all. I know that sounds a bit strange because they're fighters, but that's a sport.
Sure.
But if I know myself that they have that attribute that they bring forward, that they're aggressive or passive aggressive or manipulative or narcissistic, I won't work with them regardless of. I had an MBA player that offered me 3 times as much as I'm normally paid. And I said no, because I know that he didn't respect women at all. And having been a victim of domestic violence and manipulative conversations with people, I didn't want to put myself in that position. But also I try not to have that kind of toxic energy around me. I believe that, your frequency is lowered when you're around those people.
Definitely. You can feel it, and it changes your frequency. And this is going to be really interesting, Nina. I think we're going to take this to a few different interesting places. Nina Alk.
Nina Alk.
Nina Alk.
every vowel except E. Nina Alk.
London's life coach. Nina the Brit. Nina, is it okay if I just call you Nina today?
Definitely.
Now, there's a question that I like to ask when we start this process, and you interpret this question however you want. There is no right or wrong answer. It's just whatever the subconscious mind gives us. Where is the beginning for you?
The beginning for me really is books. I used to read a lot of books because I was a child that was neglected. I was only allowed out of my room to cook and clean, which I've said 1,000 times, but I was a modern day slave without knowing, until someone actually sat me down and explained it to me.
Wow.
And I was actually really happy going down the stairs to cook for everybody, and that was my extension of love to them, being part of the family. But where it started was those books. I really believed I was Rapunzel. I really believed I would let down my hair and somebody would come along, and I used to look out the window and actually look for people.
Wow.
But I was quite small. I wasn't a tall person. So I would stand on, there wasn't much in my room. There was a bed without bed sheets, just a bare bed with the mattress and a box, my white box, as I called it, where I put my things. And that was it. That's all I had. But the books were magical. They would help me to escape where I was. So I would, as a child, be one day on a flying carpet with Aladdin, The next day I would be with the little dwarfs, and I used to imagine, I used to play, I wasn't allowed to watch television. So I used to play the little books in my head like little story. So I would imagine, my imagination was somewhere else. It really was. I was always away with the fairies.
Wow, that's incredible. That really goes such a long way to describing the benefit of the mind, right? And being able to really exercise the mind when you're going through a process where all you've got is the books, but instead of just the books, you're creating the world as you're reading the books. What would you say is And again, of course, there are going to be many, I can imagine, but what would you say is the most challenging part of your upbringing?
Being born a girl. Simple as. I contacted a far cousin who's in America who doesn't judge me or anything. And I said to her, sis, if I was born a boy, would my life be different? And she said, very different. You would have been loved. You would have been spoiled. You would have been raised with the intention to be the best person you could be.
Wow.
And it hurts. You know, even now, this morning, my daughter sent a photo of another podcast, and there's a picture of me now and a picture of me as a young child. I don't have many photos.
Yeah.
But I always look at myself and I have this real weird expression to say, I'm here, but I'm not really here.
Yeah. Now, it's a sensitive topic, of course, and I feel like I need to be sensitive around the topic, mostly because of not being involved with the culture or with the world in which this is primarily but maybe I am. This is the thing. Who knows? I think we're all interlinked and we're all connected in so many different ways that I think that can anyone really detach themselves from a culture or a way of life and saying, well, actually, it's nothing to do with me? Or are we all responsible on some level as humans to help each other? Because I think that's an easy cop-out, isn't it? To just be like, well, it's not the culture that I'm a part of, so I don't know enough about this, haven't got enough knowledge, haven't got the experience. But then on a human level, just when you give me that one piece of information, and I have a daughter, and my daughter is my world. Yeah. She's my everything. She's 2 years old. Her name is Posey. We can talk a bit more about her later, but like as a father and as a human and as a man, you give me the information that you weren't allowed out of your bedroom apart from to cook and clean, I feel something.
Yeah.
I can't explain exactly what it is I feel. I think there's a mixture of anger, there's a mixture of hate, there's a mixture of savior, frustration. There's just a mixture of all sorts of crazy emotions when I hear something like that. What sort of level of responsibility do you feel the general population and just humans in general have to help with such a topic?
I'm very raw and real. People say I should come with a trigger warning, but life doesn't. When someone slaps you in the face, they don't say, you know, watch out, I'm about to slap you. I say it as I see it. And I think maybe having been threatened all my life that I couldn't lie, it just is a habit now just to say it as I feel. I feel you're a problem. I feel everybody watching this is a problem.
Yeah.
Because you're not part of the solution. And being part of the solution is to stop in a supermarket when you see a child being held by the wrist, just to sort of say, you okay, to the mother or the person that perceives to be the mother or father.
Yeah.
Yesterday I was on a train full of school children. The teachers were doing their best to look after the children, but I knew it would take literally 3 seconds to snatch one of those children. Yeah. Every time the doors opened, I was watching the door. The other people weren't doing that. So they could have been more vigilant and save possibly a child being snatched. I believe that we have lost our ability to love each other, that we are so busy living our lives, rushing around, liking people's posts that mean nothing to us, liking people on social media because they are celebrities or influencers.
Yeah.
Whereas we forget to like the person sitting next to us. We forget to extend a bit of love. We have become hostile and so embedded in our own phones, we don't know how to communicate anymore.
Yeah.
So everyone is part of the problem, in my opinion. I spoke to the Home Office this morning and said there is no honour in killing, but it's a cop-out. The word honour killing is not an honour killing, it's an attempted murder. I had my parents, it was an attempted murder, not an attempted honour killing. This word has been created by a culture. It's an attempted murder for the sake of an honour. You know, they're trying to retain honour.
Yeah.
But let's be realistic about it. And so many of us have turned a blind eye. So many of us scurry past a homeless person. And I was once that homeless person. We don't want a cup of coffee. We want to be seen. We want for someone to say, how are you doing? Obviously, it's we're not doing well. Or even just to extend and say, what can I do for you? Is there anything I can help you with? But again, we've become a very recluse society. It's just about me, me, me.
Yeah.
But when you need something, you look for that help and no one's giving it to you. But are you surprised?
Yeah, absolutely. How do we become part of the solution?
Well, there's so many things you can do. If you see something that you know is an injustice to anybody, spread awareness, talk about it, like these podcasts. You know, you have a responsibility to social justice, in my opinion. There is not enough of it. So speak about it. If you see somebody that's, as I said, on holiday, Oyster cards, you see somebody traveling with an Oyster card in London, it's a sign they're being trafficked, because that's the only form that they've got of transport. Nobody uses them anymore. Everybody uses contactless cards or their phones. But these people are not allowed anything but an Oyster card. But if you suspect something, if you get that feeling in the pit of your stomach, which is our signalling system, do something about it, make a discreet call. If you're a teacher, I was ignored at school. Teachers, and I went to a school recently where children are being groomed to join terrorist groups. And they're being taken to Syria by these groups. And I watched the teachers. I'm a watcher. And the teachers were really not interested. They were there for their 9 to 5. Right, class, we've got to go now. Thank Miss for her time. And they're off. We've just become a very rushed culture that doesn't care. But the teachers can say one word to save somebody's life. The doctors can do one thing to save somebody's life. My doctor has reports and evidence of my physical and mental abuse. But she said to me she didn't want to open a can of worms. Now, she had a responsibility to my children, because if my mindset was distorted, being threatened by my partner for 23 years, she could have done something. But people, again, as I keep saying, are part of the problem, not the solution.
I hear and I see detachment when you explain that, just a detachment from everyone and us being detached from each other, a detachment of responsibility and a detachment of what we're seeing and what we're hearing, like a blinders, purposefully putting these blinders on. Let's go back to the little girl in the bedroom. And I'd love to just know where does her story go from there?
She was happy. You know, little me was happy because I didn't know any different. I didn't know I was supposed to be downstairs watching television with my brothers. I used to literally get a sore ear because I'd press it against this really rough wooden door, listening to everything. And I would close my eyes and I would pretend I was on the sofa. And I would say to myself, where are we going to sit? I knew where they sat because I was the one that would take them food and things. But she was a happy girl up until 14. She was going to school, doing her best at school. I was beat up at school every day, but it was part of my life. I just thought it was a normal thing. Sometimes I'd walk past my father or mother and they would hit me, and I just knew that maybe I'd done something in a way that they didn't like, but it was an acceptance. I had accepted it. I was non-verbal at home because they didn't want to speak to me. So they would only call me, and the words were food, cook, clean, come was the word. And then my mum would point to things and push me. So I didn't have that interaction with them, and I loved to talk. So at school, I would talk my friends' ears off, and she would teach me songs, music, because I didn't get to watch television, and Top of the Pops were a thing back then. I'm old. So she would always tell me on a Friday. I'd look forward to hearing what new music was out. And I learnt about Wham, I learnt about Michael Jackson, all these songs from the 80s I learnt through her. I'd never known what they looked like until not that long ago. You know, when I was sort of 22, 23, I started to see things. But I was quite shocked because I'd imagined them to look so totally different. But yeah, so I was a happy child until 14.
What's something that you've never shared before about that little girl?
She wished she was white. She wished she was a boy. Every day I would look at people in my class and say, I wish I was you. I didn't ever want to be me, ever, until now.
That's tough. That's tough.
It was hard.
That is hard. Yeah. How does that affect who you are today?
I understand so much about what I went through today, knowing that each, I remember one of my sons was like, oh, you didn't get to study. And I thought, yeah, and I actually felt a little bit smaller for him saying that. He didn't do it intentionally.
Sure.
But I thought, yeah, I'm not educated. And often I'll go to a meeting and everyone's statistic happy, which I don't believe in, and they're educated. And I sometimes used to think I feel a little bit, but now I don't. I know that each part of my life has been my education, and I won't change any of it. Not one twist, not one turn, not one fall, not one struggle to get up. It made me, and I absolutely love who this person is today. Because from that love, I can give Liam some, I can give somebody else some. And when you come from a place of love, it's a different kind of energy completely. Because you sincerely care, you want to help that person, whatever their situation is. You don't have hatred in. I have no hate. I've forgiven, I have moved on and I've let go. I didn't want to be bitter the way my society and culture are. They're extremely bitter, very angry. I just wanted to be better because I knew by being better, I would be able to use those tools to help other people.
Wow. Better, not bitter. Incredible. What contributes to creating an environment like that, the one that you grew up in? How does an environment like that exist?
Well, my parents moved over from the north of India, the Punjab, when they were in their 20s. I think it's going back to 1960. If you're going on holiday, which I see often you do, you're packing your suntan lotion, your swimmers, you're packing your T-shirts. Yeah. They packed with them very tightly, as I describe it, their cultural beliefs. Nothing to do with religion. People confuse the two. But it's like if you're from Ireland, they make soda bread, and I go to Ireland quite a lot. And they have a certain way of making it that's been passed down from granny to great granny. Aunties make it the same way. You will make it the same way. But if you turn around and say, I don't actually like soda bread, why don't you like it? It's good enough for your aunt. It's good enough for your great gran. And how dare you do that? So there's a bit of a thing where they pass this baton down over and over again. And you get people that are young now, 12-year-olds, believing that they are born literally into this world to serve their parents, that they cannot speak up, that the girls must have their heads down like I did all my life, hunched forward, invisible. I realised the other day I've always worn black because I never wanted to be seen. Right. And I was invited to an International Women's Day. The dress code was pink and purple. And I thought, I still don't really have anything of colour because part of me is still programmed to not really want to be seen.
Wow. And you being seen offers so much light to the world. And I'm glad now that you are being seen, even though there's still that innate feeling of, well, actually, I don't want to be, because that's what the program is.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned culture. It's a culture, not a religion, and people get the two mixed up. Describe the culture to me.
So the culture is very aggressive. It's the only way I can describe it. Boys are rejoiced when boys born. It's very traditional to give out sweets to families and friends all around. They will buy hundreds and hundreds of boxes of sweets to hand out. When a girl is born, the first things that they will say is, I'm sorry. It's a girl. Yeah.
Wow.
There's no celebration. From what I understood, my mother wouldn't let anybody touch me or pick me up when I was born. So I was in the pushchair and I would soil myself, and I stopped crying after a few days. I started to play with the shadows, my hands. My aunt describes it as very difficult because they wanted to pick me up, but my mother believed there was an evil entity around me, that I was this almost witch-like person that had come and brought bad luck on the family. And they still do this. And a lot of girls, as I've said before, were killed at birth. There's a lot of abortions that still go on. It makes me laugh when they say we've passed a new law where girls under 18 won't be married, because they'll just take them somewhere else and do it.
Yeah.
Until that culture is held responsible, nothing's going to change. Until the new generation understands it's wrong, it'll continue. And if you don't do what your mother and father have done traditionally, you feel guilty. You feel like you're the one who's doing something. You feel ashamed of yourself, because that's how they bring it forward.
Yeah.
So change is very difficult to integrate, very difficult.
How far back does this go within that culture?
I in my TED talk, I say it's centuries old, and it's a devastating, deadly disease, worse than the pandemic that was going on, that people are still so frightened of. And yet this is something that's a reality, where children are married at the age of 12. They are abused sexually by family members, but nothing is done about it, or no one is talking about it. And, girls are just disregarded as nothing. I was always told, you're just a girl. And I believed that.
That's tough. And so this being centuries old, this is heavily ingrained.
Completely.
Yet you say something very interesting there about the current generation and the generations that are upcoming. That's really the only way that change can be created, I can imagine, by changing the minds of the people who are not there yet, so that all of a sudden they can change the future of what that culture looks like, because they refuse to do things the way that have been done before. How do we make that happen? That seems like a big feat, but not impossible.
No, yeah. When I first came to London, I had to move over 400 miles away from Leicestershire, which is where I was, and my partner was still trying to find me. My parents were still trying to find me. Everybody was trying to still find me, to kill me, to silence me. And I had to move because the courts had basically said, we can't keep giving you non-molestation orders. It costs the court this much money every time you come here.
Okay.
You need to move. And I thought, well, why do I have to leave everything I've ever known? But it was the best thing I did. But I became a nanny for a little while because I wanted to earn some money quickly. And I looked after a little boy, and I used to go and pick him up from school. He was a gorgeous little boy. And I had so much time for him. That's all he ever wanted, time. Sit with me. Can you play with me? Can you do the jigsaw with me? And children are very loving. They give you unconditional love. But his school used to have a little petting area and chickens and things. And I realised that they were teaching the children compassion, not just a responsibility of looking after something, but compassion. And that's where I think we can start with teaching the new generation, especially the young boys, compassion and respect. Respecting one another, whether you are a girl or a boy, for them all to have the same sort of values from birth, really.
Definitely.
But I think that's where we need to start.
Let's go back to your journey and your story. So there was that little girl, and she enjoyed going to school.
I did. I loved my life as best as I knew it. Yeah. That's all I knew. But when I got to 14, one of my jobs was my father for years would go to the pub, as many men did, on a Friday or Saturday night, and he would bring back lots of his friends. They would always be drunk, but my father always had bottles of drink at the house because he ran pubs. So it seemed the obvious place to go. But my mother wouldn't actually get up to cook for them. That was my job. I was the servant, so to speak. And I knew these men from a young age, but we don't say names. We don't say Liam if someone's older than us. We would say uncle. Or if it's a woman, we would say auntie, but they are not related.
Okay.
Not related at all. They are just friends of the family.
Yeah.
And on this particular night, I had started to develop as a young girl. My periods had set in. And I remember coming down after my mum woke me, and I was exceptionally tired because when you go through these changes, growing up, it makes you very tired when you're going through that change. And I remember sitting on the bottom step, giving them the food, thinking I really want to sleep. But there was something within me, and I keep talking about this messaging service just at the pit of your stomach, that tells you danger, that tells you it's not good for you, that tells you, yes, it's calm, it's a nice place to be. But we don't listen to it. And if we do listen to it, we don't know what to do with it. So we ignore it. And we then later on say, I knew I should have. And this particular night, it's difficult for me to talk about, but I went in to pick up the dishes as I normally did, took the tray. And my father never touched me, never held me, never hugged me or even really spoken to me. But he grabbed my wrist and with quite a force and threw me onto the table, a low table. And I had my eyes wide shut, but I knew everyone from their smell, the way they shuffled, the way they coughed, because I'd looked after these people in a certain way with their food every time they would come. And my father was the first to rape me, and then everyone else raped me, and I was thrown from the table onto the floor, against the walls. I was beaten, I was bitten, and I literally woke up in a pool of my own blood. I didn't know what to do. I woke up because my mother had opened the door and slammed it with such a force it startled me. And I was aching. My legs were aching. Internally, I was hurt. I was aching. I looked towards one arm and that was, completely covered in cuts and bruises. And I actually didn't understand what had happened. I hand on heart, had no idea I'd been raped. I just knew it felt wrong, very wrong. And I remember saying to myself in my head, because I wasn't verbal, I was not allowed to be, Daddy, don't, So it was hard. But I knew then my life was very wrong. That's the first time I actually acknowledged it. And I was forced to clear up. My immediate reaction was, I'm in trouble. I'm in so much trouble. And I cleaned the floor. I picked up the dishes. I was never allowed to shower, but my mother said I was allowed. I wasn't allowed to shower the way that others were. I used to have a bucket and I was allowed to fill it up and wash that way. But on this occasion, my mum said, use the shower. She took my clothes, which were ripped and covered in blood, and she threw them in the bin. And she gave me, I always had hand-me-downs from my brothers. She gave me some pajamas that they had. And I asked if I could sleep because I was tired and I was hurting. And I stayed in bed for days. I know that I stayed in bed for days. And eventually I went back to school, but I wasn't the same child at school. No. I was that girl that would sit right at the front of my French teacher, hand up all the time, wanting to please that teacher, wanting to be seen. But this time I was the girl sat at the back crying in a ball. The 1 or 2 friends I had didn't really know what to do. The people that bullied me still beat me up, and I didn't care. You know, where I would say stop sometimes, I just let them. My hair was always pulled and I was spat upon, and I felt I deserved it. I just literally wanted someone just to kill me. I would have been much happier at that point in that time. I'd completely given up.
And you were about 14 at this point?
I was 14.
And so the assumption is that you have to, or at least feel like you have to, continue living in this house.
Yeah, I didn't know that I could go anywhere else because I was so programmed to do what they told me to do. And I had like a best friend that was constantly talking in my ear called Fear. This person called Fear was there day in, day out. And you can't understand the level of fear that you feel unless you're born into this culture. You will resonate with what I'm saying if you are. But I was so scared of everything. And after that happened, I was even more fearful. Fearful of stepping too hard, making the floorboard creak when I stepped on it. And I actually tried to take my own life. I took an overdose. I didn't know what I was doing. It didn't work. They beat me. But I desperately just wanted out. You know, I just wanted out of that life.
After having realised that you tried taking your own life, they beat you then?
They beat me because it was strange, because sometimes I wonder why they just didn't leave me be, but they made me sick. And then I was used to getting beat. I was just used to it. But all 4 of them beat me. My 2 brothers and my parents, they punched and kicked and you know, they just beat me up. And then I got pregnant, which was a huge thing.
And how old were you then?
Well, I was just turned 15. And I had to tell my mother because I didn't know what pregnant was. But I had a sense, because they didn't teach sex education the way they do at school now. I was quite a naive 14-year-old. I didn't have access to television or magazines, or conversations weren't like that back in the 80s.
And this was after that event
This was after the rape, And I told my mother. She was really distraught. I remember she had a cup of tea and she threw the tea at me because she was so angry. And I started to clean up the floor because the tea was on the floor. That was my job. Automatically go into auto mode. I was taken to a clinic. I don't know where it was, but I remember it was in the Midlands somewhere. I remember it was one of the first times I'd gone in my parents' car, and I was looking out the window at the back and I was watching the world almost. And I was imagining things. And when I went to this clinic, I remember it was literally lots of beds. I was given gas and air, then I was sedated. I remember everything, but the one thing I always talk about that I remember the most is afterwards you are sat on a green grass verge, and there was a lot of grass around. It was in the countryside somewhere, and a lady came and she stroked my hair like this. And I thought, wow, Nina, how bad can you be that somebody wants to touch you? Because no one had ever done that. And it was that one act of kindness that made me think, I'm not that bad. You know, she handed me a cup of tea with a biscuit. And I thought, wow, somebody actually saw me for me.
Do you remember that lady's name?
She worked there.
She would have come and gone.
Yeah, but I have never forgotten the way she made me feel. And people say, you don't forget how somebody makes you feel. And
Absolutely.
It's true.
That's so significant, isn't it? Because it's almost like there would be no reason to know that lady's name. There'd be no reason to know anything about her. You know, she was there in that moment, but what a mark to have left.
I mean, I was not looking up because, you know, I was taught never to look up or to have eye contact. And you've probably come across people now after this and you'll notice it more, that girls, women of Asian ethnicity, we don't make eye contact. We're not supposed to. It's deemed as being rude, or that you're flirting with somebody, or, you know, it's something that we're programmed not to do.
So this was around about when you was 15.
Yeah. So I came back from that, and I was literally dragging one foot in front of the other. I was literally on survival mode, not knowing what was happening. When you have these procedures, I believe it's like a vacuum thing, but it still hurts. You're still going through a process of having had an abortion. It's a taboo subject. People don't talk about it. People don't talk about it in most cultures, let alone my own. There's a real stigma, and you feel dirty. And I say openly now that I was raped, but it wasn't my intention. it was like my father's hands are the ones that are shameful and dirty. He was supposed to protect me and he didn't. So if there's anyone listening that has gone through sexual abuse, know that it's not on you, that you shouldn't be the one who feels the shame. The shame is on those that have done it.
Definitely.
I ended up being told to come downstairs one day by my mother. She gave me something to wear, which was odd. I was very worried because all the way home, my father kept saying we should have killed her. You know, what are we going to do with her? Because I was no longer a virgin. And I really felt bad about it myself. I hadn't caused it, but I felt bad. I was carrying that weight. And one of the perpetrators who had raped me continuously and stayed right till the end, he was very well known in the temple that we visited. He was one of the religious leaders. He had a turban. And people think people in churches and people in temples and people in mosques, they are regarded as the wise ones, the ones that are pure. But it's not always the case. No. It's very often the opposite. And he said to my father that my son has an English girlfriend and they can get married and he can have his English girlfriend. I want her as my sex slave and she can carry on with the cooking and cleaning in my house. And he said all of this while his wife is sat there. My brothers are sat there in front of me. Then they had a bit of an argument about money and gold because he wanted gold for his daughters. And then there was an argument about actual cash money. And it was almost like this huge trade going on while I'm sat there with my head down, not knowing what I'm supposed to be doing. My heart is sinking, thinking, is he going to call other men to rape me too? Am I going to become, is this going to be my life now? And I'm 15, I've gone through a real horrible time with the rape. And it was almost like a deal was done. It was almost like a business transaction. There was no emotion. Then I was told to sit in the middle. They put this, it's called a chunni, which is like a veil over my head, which signifies the engagement. They feed you sweets. They put money in your lap. The money's obviously taken away. It's not my money. They took a few photos and that was it. They were all happy and everyone was saying, oh, this is great. I'm happy. And my brothers are saying they're happy. And I went upstairs when I was told to go and I thought, what's happy? What does happy mean?
There was no connection to the word itself. No. It's not something you'd ever even experienced. There was no understanding of it. And everyone was experiencing this thing around you, which seemingly was smiles on faces and seemed good, but there was no connection between you and that core human emotion at that time.
No, I didn't get it. And then before I know it, the wedding, I was supposed to be married at 15, but they had a daughter who needed to get married and there was a delay. In our culture, you marry the daughters off first and the son gets married. And in that time, I'd started a year at college and my partner that I was going to marry was at college too. But we knew each other from the temple. We kind of grew up alongside each other. So every now and then we would have a little, hello, how are you sort of thing. And people still made assumptions we were dating. And I quite liked that. I quite liked, oh, yes, you know, maybe people believe it. But I knew he had this other person. But we didn't really say very much. It's just we were seen occasionally. And the wedding day came. I was sent a beautiful outfit from my mother's side of the family, which is tradition.
Yeah.
They sent it from India. It's the first time I'd actually worn something new.
Right, really.
And I remember feeling quite nice in it. I remember, you know, people say when you dress up and you look after your health, you feel good. And it's so true. I had my school friend who was Greek and she had her wedding at 16. It was arranged too, but she was a makeup artist. So, well, she said she was a makeup artist. So she came to do my makeup, but she wasn't allowed to stay because her parents wouldn't allow her to be in my house for too long. So she came and did my makeup. I felt really odd looking at myself. I didn't recognise who I was.
No.
The wedding ceremony went on. You sort of just go along with what you're being told. Sit here, stand up, sit down. And then the party came and they asked me to go home and everyone else is dancing. And as I'm leaving, I was in a separate room. I could see them dancing. And I was thinking, wow, they all seem really happy. There's a lot of alcohol being drunk, a lot of food being eaten. When I got home, I was on my own and I was still in my outfit and I wanted to take it off. And I did think, because there were a way out, I did think, but I didn't know. I didn't have the courage.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if escape was ever within your conscious awareness.
It was the first time I'd ever thought about it. But I was too scared. My friend Fear was constantly telling me no.
And at this time, are we referring to not escape through suicide, but an actual getting away
Just
from these individuals
somewhere.
and going somewhere else? That was the first time in your life that became a thought for you.
But you see, if you do something like that, you become estranged from the community. You are a black sheep. You are hunted down, sometimes to be killed. So that fear is a real fear.
And you knew this, even at that age, you knew that.
I knew my father would definitely kill me.
Yeah, you knew that. So where does the story go from there?
I ended up getting married, obviously, on that day. I went into my father-in-law's and mother-in-law's house and I became their servant. But they lived a different life to my parents. My father was a businessman, whereas this man and woman had a smaller house, a very small terraced house, in a very Asian community. I'd been brought up in a very white British area. So they spoke differently, they acted differently. I found it a little bit strange. They wanted me to get a job, and I got a great job. Within a couple of I think months, I was promoted from clerical assistant to clerical officer, and then I wanted to be a manager. And I found a way of getting to be a manager by networking. You know, I would stand at the coffee machine. I would go where I'm not supposed to go and just say, hi, I'm Nina. I'm after a job. I bet you'd love to employ me. And they found me quite comical. I was one of the only Asian people at that time working in a large corporation.
Sure.
And I did really well. And it made me feel good. I had this almost alter ego that would go to work and she'd be happy and smiley. Yeah. But the bruises were there, the cuts were there.
Is that something that's quite common as well, where women within your culture who have gone through that process and have been part of this arranged marriage, and it's like you mentioned, it's like you're a slave inside of this home, also being able to go and get a job? Is that a common thing?
Normally they won't. Normally they won't be allowed. Our roles are just to clean the house and look after children, to produce children. That's all we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But this particular family were very greedy for money, and all of my wages went to them. But every day I was raped by my father, and if I wasn't raped, I was pulling his hands out of my knickers and screaming at him to try and stop. You know, I used to close my eyes so tight I thought they would pop at some point.
Yeah.
They would tie me up with coat hangers and leave me on the floor naked and go out for the day on a Sunday to a wedding or something, and the coat hangers would actually dig into my skin and make it bleed. And I used to think, well, you know what, if you left me here and told me to sit, I wouldn't move anyway because I'm so scared of it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even cry because I thought they would see the tracks of my, literally, you know, my tears. They would see that I'd been crying. So I wouldn't even cry out of fear. There was one phone in the house and who was I going to ring? Who was I going to ask for help? But at work, I met two people. It was a couple. She was Indian. Her name was Bali, actually, and she had a boyfriend who was Nigerian. I never liked him. There was always something about him I didn't like, but he was kind. He always offered me help. She was kind, always offered me help. And they started to notice things, that my socks were always drenched in blood. You could see it. And once I showed her, and we had a powder room where we worked, it was quite posh. Yeah. And I showed her and she said to me, this is not normal. You know, my parents are Indian, but they're not like this.
And I can imagine that was a surprise for you to hear that at that time. Was it? Because for you, was it just
a surprise from another Indian person telling me this? Because I thought all girls were going through it.
Yeah.
And she talked me into going home. And people say, well, why would you go back to the same house where you were raped?
To your mum and dad's house.
Why would you go back to your mum and dad's house if they treated you so badly?
Yeah.
But we don't know any better. You know, we're so programmed, and we're scared. That fear's there. We're scared of how will we be perceived. And all I really wanted was for them to say I can stay with them and to love me.
Yeah.
To actually give me a big hug and say, you've been through some really hard times. We're sorry. But they knew what was going on.
Yeah.
You know, now looking back, I know they knew that he was sexually abusing me. They knew that my money was being taken. They knew that I had a problem with food. I was very weak and almost anorexic because my mother-in-law would throw the whole plate of food into the bin. I've said this before. And then she would watch me and tell me to go and eat out of the bin. And it's soul destroying to be told that, because you start to do it because you're hungry.
Yeah.
But then you can't anymore. And I stopped. You know, I just said, I don't need to eat. And people at work would feed me, and I didn't want anyone to help me because I felt guilty. So desserts were always the cheapest thing. 35 pence in the restaurant they had at work, and they would buy me custard and cake. I had this addiction to sweet things, which I still do. But I didn't value myself either to know that I shouldn't be treated this way because I was just a girl. Those words stay with you. The bruises, they heal. You know, a broken arm can be fixed to a certain degree, but what you're told really brings you down. It's almost like a dialogue that you play to yourself back and forth, back and forth.
So true.
Who am I? I'm just a girl.
That's why I always say that when people say sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. I mean, it's the biggest load of rubbish that there is. It's the biggest lie anyone's ever told, isn't it? They cut deeper than any stick or any stone.
They do.
That was one thing I wanted to ask you as well, and it leads on to that, is that what sort of values does a young woman like that hold on to? You know, what's important to you at that time in your life?
Well, most girls still hold the same values as I held back in the 80s, that I'm just a girl.
Yeah.
I didn't have any values. I had to retain being honest. You know, I would never lie out of fear. I would never do anything my parents told me I couldn't do. It's almost like a rule book that you follow, and you have to be invisible, but you have to make sure the food is cooked, the kitchens are clean, the house is clean. If somebody comes, you have to be very subservient and treat them like they're royalty almost, so that your parents looked upon as having raised a good girl. And I wanted to be that good girl.
Okay. The person who you was married to, and so you were all living in a house together. It was you, it was your new husband, it was his mum and dad. Siblings of his?
He had a younger brother and sister, but they all had bedrooms upstairs.
Yeah.
I had nothing sexually or emotionally to do with my partner that I was married to, my husband per se.
Yeah.
It was a sham wedding. It was just on paper.
Yeah.
I was downstairs on my own in this very makeshift bedroom, which was almost like a servant's quarters, I'll call it.
Yeah.
It was very small because I was used to having quite a big room at my parents'.
Yeah.
And it was for access, I guess. He could come down and do what he wanted to.
Yeah.
There was no privacy at all for me.
And how long did you live there?
I stayed there for 4 years. It was a very long 4 years.
And so was this the husband that you left?
So I went back to my mum and dad's and left him, and the father-in-law and the mother-in-law, left everything that I'd ever had. And I went to work one day and just didn't go back. I just went straight to my mum and dad's. They knew I was on my way, because in our culture, community sees people, and it's a very tight-knit community. You can't do anything without anybody seeing what you're doing, really.
Wow.
So I'd got onto the bus to my parents, and before I was there, they knew I was on my way.
Yeah. Because
somebody had seen me, you know, and a mother's friend had seen me, and they were waiting, and they were angry. And I think the longer it took me to get there, the more angry they got. So I did get pulled in, but not to be held or cuddled. I got pulled in to be beaten, and it wasn't like the normal beatings, and it shouldn't. Nobody should say a normal beating.
No, they shouldn't.
But this was definitely, they wanted to kill me. I could tell. The fear that I was carrying around was amplified. I was beyond scared. I just completely didn't know what to do. I was quite a frail person. I was bouncing off the walls. My brother's 6 foot tall. My other brother wasn't present. My mother was there with her arms crossed. My sister-in-law, who was married to my middle brother, you know, the middle child, she was there very angry. And my father's an ex-professional wrestler. He used to wrestle in the days of Giant Haystack.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to build a picture that you can understand. I'm outbeaten already before I've tried. There's no way of me defending myself.
Yeah.
And they broke my jaw. And strangely, the other day, my friend was stood next to me, and I just opened up to eat something, and he said, "What was that noise?" You see, you can't fix a broken jaw. It's still there.
Yeah.
But they broke my jaw. They broke my arm. And then when I eventually fell down, they stamped on me and they kicked me. And the insults were so heavy, Liam. They were telling me that I was a prostitute, that I would be nothing, that I should have been killed at birth, that why am I such a burden to them? And what have I done? How have I brought so much shame forward? And I felt, I should be here. I should be killed. I've really upset my parents. I've really broken, you know, the rules, so to speak. And my father had his foot on my neck, and I felt myself literally leave my body. And I almost saw myself from the outside in, and I was just a crumbled little bundle of bones. And something around me said, no, not yet. It's not time. And I remember going back in, and I remember looking at a carpet. The carpet was like a swirly design. Blood was dripping off my nose onto the carpet. And I was just staring and I felt nothing. They were still kicking me. They were still saying things, but I was numb. I was completely numb. I was almost in limbo of nearly going and still staying.
Yeah.
And then suddenly my other brother walked in. He said, "What are you doing? We can't do that here. Stop." And they all just ran out and left me, all of them. And I lay there for days. I say 3, but I have no idea how many days, because I didn't know what day of week it was.
So they left the house?
No, they left the room.
They left the room.
And my house was quite big. And I was in and out of consciousness. You know, again, I was another almost bath of blood this time, not a pool. It was, and there was no, my body had dried blood on it. I must have looked like something out of a horror film.
Yeah, yeah. And I can imagine, and my assumption is that that wasn't some sort of heroic thing from your brother. It was more of a, don't do it here.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Or
I've never said this before, but my father was actually being investigated by the police.
Yeah.
He'd set fire to, I think he set fire, making an allegation, so I'm not going to say I know definitely or not, but one of his pubs had been set fire to, and he was being investigated for arson.
Okay.
So I think they were being careful because they'd been in for questioning back and forth.
Right.
So possibly that was the reason. But my father had told me since I was a young girl I would be buried under the floorboards, and I actually believed him. But they left me, and a couple of days later, or whenever it was, somebody came. It was my mother's friend who was quite kind. She opened the door, and I had a nickname that my mother's father had named me, called Nimmy. And she said, "Nimmy, they're going to send you to India. Please ask for help when you get to the airport. Quickly close the door." And it was almost like this massive flurry of words coming towards me slowly, and I had to understand
quick little warning.
It was a warning, but the words were so condensed and so quick. I couldn't quite understand what she was telling me, and it took me a bit of time to understand. And then there was a sudden shock and fear and panic, and I was anxious. And I knew that if you don't do something, you are literally not going to go to the airport and ask for help, because you're going to be too weak. You're literally just going to go along with it. And on the other side, it would be either I would be killed, or I would be given to an older man, or possibly I would be trafficked, now that I know what is going on with my father, what he's done. So I just knew I had to get away. And that was the first time I felt some courage to do so. But then also I didn't know how I was going to do it, because I was literally a bag of broken bones, literally just holding myself together. And I say I crawled like a baby, but the truth is I was like shuffling. I was pulling myself along. My hands were too weak to hold my body up. So I was doing what I could do. And when I got to the door, then I thought, how am I going to do this? But I was talking to myself continuously. I was saying, come on, you can do this. Just a bit further. You can do this. Just a little bit more. You'll be fine. It's all going to be okay. I was constantly telling myself. So I was using my words to encourage myself. And it seems impossible, because I tell you what, if you were there, you would say she's not going to make it. But I did. And I got to the, a pivotal moment was that I got to the outside of the house, and there was a fence. My father had this 6-foot tall bloody fence, and my dog came and sat next to me, and she was the loudest person. She was always barking. The neighbours were complaining. And I put my hand on her nose to say, please don't do anything. Please don't bark. But she was my first feeling of warmth. Wow. When she came into the house, I was responsible for taking her to, for a walk. That's why I was allowed out of the house, because of her. But she would sit next to me. She would shuffle her bum into me. Yeah. And it was the first almost human interaction, or not human, obviously, but she was the first warmth that I ever felt.
And connection.
And I always looked after her, and she knew that, and I said to her, please just don't do it. And she looked at me, and she looked up, and she looked at me again, and she looked up, and people said, "Oh, was she speaking to you?" Which was sarcastically. It's a very silly thing to say, but yeah, I think she probably was.
Yeah,
she was probably saying to me, "You can do this. I've seen what happens in this house. I know it's wrong. You've got this."
Yeah.
And sometimes we need a sign. We need somebody to encourage us. We need that almost just a little push. Come on, you've got this.
Yeah.
I also knew she would start barking, so I had to go.
Yeah.
And how I got over the fence, I still don't know, but I did. I remember falling really hard when I got on the other side, and I made a noise, and I thought, I hope they haven't heard me. She started to bark, which was normal, so they would have ignored it had they'd heard it. And then I made my way to a little park across the road, and I collapsed, and I stayed there until the early hours of the next day.
And then what happened then?
I made my way to a taxi place. I said, I haven't got any money. Can you get me to this place? Yeah. My friends live there. They'll pay you. But it was very early in the morning. He said to me, you need to get to a hospital, love. And he was a really kind person. He said, is somebody after you? And I said, yes. So he put me on the back seat and covered me with a blanket.
Wow.
And that could have gone a lot of different ways to the way it did. But he tucked me in almost. I've never had that.
No.
I remember feeling quite wanting to cry, but I have always held back my tears till recently.
Yeah.
My father always said, if you cry, you're weak. And he took me to where I asked him to take me, but nobody answered the door. There was a newsagents. They were the landlords of my friends. And I said, I'm trying to get to them. And she goes, well, everyone's probably asleep. I'm only awake because I'm sorting out the newspapers.
Yeah.
And then he said, look, don't worry about the money. I'm going to take you across there because it's a police station. So he took me across to the police station. There was a really jolly policeman there. You know, I remember his name was PC Pete, super chap, you know, really happy. Saw me, very concerned, said all the right things that I wanted to hear about. This is terrible. This is an inhumane thing that's happened to you. Took photos of me, started to fill out paperwork. What happened? It was an attempted honour killing, and he stopped. Let's just get you to a hospital, he said. And he was very uncomfortable. He said, you really need to get these injuries treated. It's very, you know, you really need to get somewhere. So, okay. So I'm submissive again. I'm listening. I'm not going to stand up and find a voice and say, no, I want you to put a report in.
Yeah.
I didn't, because he was a man. Yeah. I was a girl. I was listening. I was obeying, which is what I was taught to do. I got to the hospital. I lay there for months. I was in the hospital getting better, but there was a yellow sticky tab on my file that said attempted honour killing. And nobody smiled at me. Everyone shuffled around uncomfortably. Nobody asked me what's happened. I used to watch families come and visit other people on the ward, and they would bring Lucozade and grapes. And I thought, well, this is really good. I know if someone's ill and I go to see them, I will take them Lucozade and I will take them grapes.
Yeah.
You know, but I never once thought, why is nobody coming to visit me?
No.
Never once.
No. And this was, at what point did you then go to London? What point did you
I was
completely escape?
Yeah, well, this led me to going back to my friend's house, who I ended up staying with for 23 years. He gave me alcohol at a party. I was renting a room within his place.
Yeah.
Because his girlfriend had left, and he said, you can still stay here. I'll look after you. Yeah. You've got to rent a room. So we were just friends. I'd never dated in my life, never took me to a restaurant or anything. We just went to a party, which was the landlord's party. But instead of giving me Coke, he gave me Malibu and Coke, which I've never drank ever again.
Yeah.
He raped me. I got pregnant. But when my daughter was born, I felt like I was supposed to be there, that was my calling, that this little bundle of joy had come into my life. I felt a reason to live. Yeah. And I wanted to give everything I'd never had. I promised she would be protected and loved, and she would be raised in the way I was never loved.
And this was a result
of the rape.
And
I stayed with him, and I said to him, look, let's make it a family. You know, he wasn't really interested. And people are quick to blame him, but you have to also look at it from a different point of view. Yes, he didn't need to be so aggressive, but maybe he felt trapped too. I don't know. I'm not condoning his actions at all. I want to say that. I went on to have another son because obviously we were sleeping on and off together, but he was having extra relations all over the place. I thought that was normal, having seen my father. And I had a son who was, you know, a beautiful second baby. And then I got pregnant again. And the violence was getting worse. I was being pushed down. Before it was mental abuse, now it become physical abuse. But I was used to that, right? And fear was telling me, don't say anything because you can't say anything. You've got the kids as well. But I was so into my businesses that I'd started to develop. I was actually really flying high when it came to making money. I was one of those people that could do it.
This man, what culture was he from?
He's Nigerian. He's from Africa, which is a very similar culture. They look down on their women. Not all of them, not all Indians, but, you know, a majority of them have this stigma of a girl, you know, a woman. They don't treat them.
And what a thing to affect your belief system as well, in terms of, well, it's not just the men from this culture, it's just...
I just thought that's how men are.
That's
what I believe.
Exactly what I can imagine.
That. With the teachers at school, you know, they would pick on us, and I just thought that's how teachers, men, just the way men are. I didn't know any different. I didn't know about kind people at all. Most people in my life weren't kind. I got pregnant for the third time because I wanted 3 kids, I'll be honest. He didn't want any more after the first. And on this pregnancy, he was exceptionally annoyed because I had to pay him £8,000 a month just for being there. And I didn't have it this particular month because I was trying to buy one of the properties.
Yeah.
I didn't want to keep renting. I wanted to build a portfolio because at some point I wanted to go to my dad and say, look at me. Look what I've created, Dad. I'm just as good as the boys, aren't I?
Was there any communication between you and your parents at this point? Nothing since you jumped that fence?
Nothing.
That was it?
That was it. I was just being looked for.
You were being looked for.
And I lived away from the area. I lived in Leicestershire, but not in Leicester. I was in
and they didn't know where you were?
They didn't know where I was. Okay. So I got pregnant with my third child, and then he pushed me down the stairs, and he left. I ended up going to the hospital because I could feel something coming out, a foot or a hand. I didn't know what it was. And I gave birth to my third child in hospital. And he stopped breathing after literally a minute. And I could hear all the other babies crying in the ward. And I'm saying to myself, but yours isn't. And your body so much wants to hold this warm bundle of joy, and it's not there. And it's really hard for anyone to understand because that baby's inside you.
Yeah.
You know, I was 8 months pregnant, so the bump was there, but there was nothing to show for it. My arms were literally empty. I just wanted him back. I found it probably the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with, burying my own child. He wouldn't let me have a funeral because he said he didn't really matter, he wasn't real. The hospital took pity on me and helped me to have a little service. And it was a tiny little white coffin with a Forever Friends thing with a T for his name. And, you know, he made me late for the funeral. He did everything he could do to disrupt it, but my daughter was there. The children are so innocent. You know, she said, that's my brother. She sang him a nursery rhyme. She touched him. She didn't feel any, you know, my partner wouldn't let me touch the baby because he said, what are you doing? And it was very difficult. If anyone's been through that, you know, my heart goes out to them because it's just one of the hardest things that it's very difficult to explain to other people who just don't get it. But I became very depressed at that point. I wanted to give up. I kept thinking I should have died, not him. And I nearly did die because I went into shock after giving birth and I couldn't get rid of the afterbirth. I couldn't give birth. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And that sends you into shock. So I was on my own in the hospital, literally hanging on to life. And they didn't come to see me. Nobody came to see me for days. You know, he brought my daughter and my other son after a few days to see me. And that's when I went home, I guess. But life wasn't the same.
No.
I needed back what I believed God at that time had taken. And I asked my partner I wanted another baby. He was like, I've had enough of you. I don't want to be with you. But he wouldn't leave either because I was like his money box.
Yeah.
And he would be very aggressive. He set fire to my pillow as I was sleeping. My daughter put it at one time. I woke up and my hair was on fire, and you don't forget the smell of hair burning. It's a very triggering smell for me. And he would say things like, well, I just want to end it. But I never really sat back and understood that he wasn't trying to end it. He was trying to end me. And the threat was, if you leave, I will kill you. But he was already trying to kill me. So if you're suffering from domestic violence and listening to this, know that you're already in a very dangerous situation, that you think you're staying for the children, but the children are watching what's going on and it's affecting them, and it goes on to affect them, which it affected my children with their mental health. I ended up having another baby. I had a baby boy. I remember the nurse taking me into a room and I said, I don't want to be in this room. I want to be in a pink room, because I was sure I'd have a girl, not a boy again. And I had a little boy, and he actually kind of saved me without knowing it. He kind of, almost like an engine's given up, he almost turned the key and I was back to me. And it sounds selfish, but I needed him for me to keep going.
Yeah.
And again, I started to sort my life out the way I best knew. I was running about 7 businesses by now. I was on paper a millionaire. My kids were at boarding and private schools because they were going to get what I didn't get. I didn't have a life. I would wake up at 5 a.m. I would do all of the things I had to do, cook for my partner in case he was hungry when I wasn't there, go and pick up stuff because we were doing an extension in the house, which ended up being a 7-bedroom house because of that. But I was watched constantly. My car was tracked. When I dropped the boys to school, I was on FaceTime so he could see if I spoke to anyone. When I got to work, I would put the phone down, he would switch to remote access. on CCTV. Even when I went to the toilet, I had to take my phone so he could hear me. If he was in the office, he would watch me and come into the toilet. If I went for a smear test, a lady's, checkup, he would come with me. And the nurses never asked once why. So many people along my life have not questioned anything that they should have.
Yeah.
They should have seen it. And to cut a long story short, my situation got so bad that my youngest son developed Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune disease from stress. They were boys playing for West Brom in their academy, so they were in Premier League academy, but he was getting worse and worse with the stress that he got dropped, which affects them so much because that's all they know. That's all he ever knew from a young age, playing football.
Yeah.
He got dropped, and my partner saw it as a disability, which it is, and said that it's not my son because I won't have a kid that has a problem with him. He didn't come to visit him once, and he was in hospital, in and out, having operations. Not once did he come. And the one time he came to ask for money because he was going to China just before a major operation that they had said to me can be quite dangerous.
Yeah, I've known someone with Crohn's, and it can be life or death with these operations.
And he went on this trip, and that's the only time he came. And the nurse said he wants to see you outside, not here. And I was like, okay, And when he came back from his trip, we'd come out of hospital, and my daughter received a picture message. She had a picture that I was asleep. She knew I had insomnia from having my pillow set on fire. And also, he would lock us in our rooms. So the lock would go at 11 and it would be unlocked at 5 in the morning. So I have this time thing. So she knew I wouldn't sleep. It was daytime as well. And my son was slumped over a desk, and she thought something's very wrong. Again, that internal messaging thing's going round and round her stomach saying this is dangerous. She thought at some point she would get a message from someone saying that I'd been killed. She believed that. And under the picture it said, I'm sorry, and it was from her dad. She managed to wake me up by calling the phones in the house. When I got to the kitchen, sorry, it's hard.
Of course.
When I got to the kitchen, I'd realised he'd turned all the taps on, and the whole house was full of gas, just waiting to explode. But I was so programmed, and my friend here sitting, called Fear, saying you can't walk out that door. I feel such a bad parent. I literally picked up my 15-year-old son, I don't know how. I took him upstairs and sat with him in his room. I didn't leave. And then again, the door was shut at night, and the two of us are in there, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I don't know what to do. I need help, but I don't know who to ask. It's so hard to ask for help.
Yeah.
It's one of the hardest things to say. I just don't know what to do. Please help me. But it was my son who found the courage at school to say, I need help. And by doing that, I got that kick at the bum to say, we're taking that kid away from you because you can't look after him because you're a bad parent, because you had your pillow set on fire and you didn't think it could happen to them, which is true. But I needed someone to actually say it to me for me to see it myself.
Yeah.
And I let them down. I did let them down as a parent. My reality was so distorted from childhood, from this person threatening me, that I believed that I was still nothing, that it didn't matter. But I had children that I brought into this earth that I was supposed to look after, I was supposed to protect. And we became, we were removed very quickly. You have 20 minutes to take whatever you want, and it's very difficult. What do you take first? I took a plastic hammer that my kids used to play with when they were little. What good was that going to do me? I had a long coat, this plastic hammer, and my son's hand in mine. He didn't even have a coat. We ended up in this place in Lutterworth, which is a safe home, they call it. It's probably 12 miles away from where I was living. I was used to a really good life because I'd created that myself.
Yeah.
And we ended up on this estate. Nothing wrong with estates, but there were a lot of children throwing bottles around, a lot of noise, a lot of poverty. But when I walked into this room, my foot literally sunk into the carpet and made a squelchy noise because it was full of urine. And on the walls there was poo, because whoever was there before, I think, didn't look after their babies, and the babies were emptying their own nappies, possibly. That's the only explanation I could think of. There were 2 bedrooms. The front bedroom had poo again all over it, and I just shut that door. There was one room that seemed half clean, and I had a tissue similar to this. You know, you never find one when you need one.
Yeah.
And I remember opening it up and trying to clean this bed. I took off my coat and I wrapped my son in it, and he was mentally and physically exhausted. He fell asleep so quickly. And I sat in the other room on a very uncomfortable sofa, looking at the blue carpet. I can't stand blue carpet now. And I started to cry. It's the first time I actually cried, really cried. You know, I cried for that little girl. I cried for the neglect. I cried for the people that pushed me down the stairs at school as well, and would spit and hit me and punch me for no reason and call me names. I cried for the woman. I cried for being raped. And I just couldn't stop crying, literally, like I am now, I guess. But I did create like almost a puddle. I remember looking down and thinking, what are you going to do? You're either going to drown or you're going to dance. And it was it's the truth, and it's the moment I remember so clearly that I said, no, you're going to dance. And at some point you're going to look back at this and you're going to say to yourself, I did it, I'm okay. And I was determined to do something that was going to make a change, because I had him to look after too. I owed it to him, I felt.
Yeah.
My daughter was at university. The other was literally in a 5-star boarding school. He was looked after. His fees were paid. She was there. Her fees were paid. His school fees were paid, but I couldn't do anything with that.
Yeah.
He couldn't go to school the way he was.
No.
But there was a moment we became homeless because the government said, you know, on paper, you've got this much money, you can't claim any benefits. So if you don't pay rent here, you can't stay. So we had nowhere to go. No one, the few people that I knew that I thought were my friends, I asked if they would take Tash, and they said, oh no, he might see him, you know, he might see him here. We don't want to have trouble from your ex. And I thought, but you used to offer me help.
Yeah.
And used to come over and get me into a lot of trouble, but now you're saying you won't do it.
Yeah.
So I had nobody, and it's always the way, isn't it, that somebody else comes along that you don't really know. At the school, I was involved with the community and certain things, because that's how I got a reduced fee, because I'm one of those negotiators.
Yeah.
And a lady, her name's Nikki Bliss, she has always been my angel. A very God-fearing person. She's, you know, very religious. Said, I want you to come and live with me. And I said, take Tash, take my youngest, take him, please. And she said, no, I want you also. And I said, all right, well, I'll cook and clean for you. Because I didn't think somebody would do something for me without wanting something back.
Yeah.
But she just wanted to look after me. So I said to her, I'll come on the understanding, because I have to negotiate everything, that in 1 month I will leave, and I'll have enough money in a month to leave. So I started to clean people's toilets and their factories and any work offices. I would nanny, I would do people's VAT returns, I would help people start new businesses, I would help anybody doing anything. And so 24/7 I was working, because my kid was being looked after. He was there, he was happy. He was happy having his own room, his own bathroom. He was really being spoiled with a lot of love and attention. So I did everything I could to try to get as much money as I could, so that somebody would rent to me, because nobody wanted to rent to me. So I had enough money literally for 3 months, and I could say to a landlord, would you rent to me? And I found the perfect place where nobody would see me. It was invisible. It was a village with just sheep, a church, and it was perfect. 20 houses. But when we got there, my son suddenly changed. He was wanted by all the top universities for economics and business. He was very, very intensely bright. Both my children are on the autistic spectrum anyway, but they were so intensely bright, the youngest. But the spark had gone off. You would look at him and he wasn't really ever there. I later found out that he was going to school, but he was wandering around the corridors. He was never in class. But that was never brought to my attention. He failed his year. And they said, well, we understand why he's failed. We'll drop him down and he was one of the younger ones anyway, so it didn't really matter. He seemed to cope with it really well. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay there. So, okay, I was still trying to find money. So I was doing all these jobs to find money to pay for the private schooling. And admittedly, they gave me a reduced fee. They helped me out. But one day he went to see his sister and he disappeared. He had run away. We didn't know where he'd gone. But he sent me a message saying I'm not coming home by text. And he told me where to look, a box in his room. So I went to find this box, and it had a suicide note in it. And it said he heard voices in his head. My son was obsessed with Batman, which is quite funny with you sitting there.
Yeah.
And Heath Ledger. And he'd borrowed money from someone at school, gone to Miami, booked a one-way ticket, a room in the middle of nowhere in a hotel in a really rough area that he obviously didn't know because he's very naive, in the hope to buy a gun so he could shoot himself and kill himself. And I read the note. My son that was with me, my other son, had a memory stick because they both supported Barcelona. We were Barcelona fans, still are. And the memory stick went in, and it was all of their favourite clips from films that meant so much to both of them. And I couldn't lose this child. And I screamed, really screamed. And my son was scared at the way I screamed. And I said, I'm not losing him. We're going to get him back. And in all of this madness, I had connected. Somebody had offered me a job. And I'd gone for the interview, but it was wrong timing. It wasn't, I was just coming out of being homeless. I was still living at this lady's house when this had happened. And but I'd made a connection in America, somebody that's quite well known that writes music for Notorious B.I.G. He's a very well recognised person. And I contacted him and I said, I'm sorry to ask this, but my son's missing. And he might answer your message if you message him because you're famous, And he said, anything for you, I'll do it. And he sent him a message and he did. He answered. And he replied to me and said, he's in Miami. What shall I do? I said, can you keep him on the phone so we know he's alive? He said, not a problem, we're texting. So I said, if you're texting, I'll get someone to ring him. So I asked Nikki. I said, Nikki, please. Literally, I was begging, please help me to get him back. He answered the call. We managed to talk him. We ordered an Uber. It's amazing what you can do to get him to an airport, got him a ticket. But the boy that came back wasn't the boy that went. He was very angry, full of aggression, completely given up. He threw plates. Everyone said he's got psychosis. Take him to a hospital, make him stay in a mental ward. And I kind of listened to people stupidly. They were saying he needs to take drugs. Stupidly, I was listening. And then I stopped and said, no. All he needs is some love and some space. Because I think with mental health, there's so much noise. Think about what this kid's been through. So much noise, so many voices. He couldn't even hear his own voice. I think when we have a headache, we hold our head in our hands because we want it to stop. We want the noise to stop. So I left him and I looked after him and I gave him some boundaries because I think boundaries are very important. So don't throw the plate in the dishwasher because I was going through plates left, right and centre. You're not allowed to do this. I gave him a space. We moved very far away and I have a standard of living. I will work to my standard of living and I want my children to understand they deserve that. They deserve a big house with a garden and a drive. They deserve it. Everyone said when you get to London, get a flat, rent a flat or ask the council. And I said, no, I will do what I need to do. I will work hard within my means to provide, which is what I did. We had a lovely 4-bedroom and it was 4 bedrooms because I wanted to give him a room to come out of his room to play on his games or whatever he was doing because they're all gamers. And that's what happened and where we are now. He has to come downstairs and his little office is downstairs and he reads and he thinks. But the thing is, it took time. You can't go to the gym once and expect to have a six-pack. You have to keep going. It took months of having food thrown at me, plates being broken, patience, love, telling him, reassuring him he's okay, he's safe, that no one's going to hurt him. His father will never come after him. It took time. But last year was the first time he said goodnight.
Really?
And it was such a magical thing for me because it was the day before my birthday and he said goodnight. And I knew that slowly but surely he would come back. And I gave him a job to do. I said, I know you're not, feeling great, which I understand, but I want to do a property sort of something to do with property. Would you help me? Would you be part of it? I've got somebody involved. He's an ex-footballer. Do you know him? Yeah. He's a friend of mine now. Would you work with him? And we want to develop this thing into flats. That gave him that incentive. But what really helped is when he would talk to me, I would listen.
Yeah.
We don't listen to each other. We think about, I've got to do this. Oh, when Liam's finished, I need to go in quickly. Oh, yeah, I'm listening. But we're checking our phones under the table. Or we don't actually sit and acknowledge that person and give them that time they deserve with respect.
Definitely, I know.
And it's not just your children. We do it to people everywhere.
Yeah.
Often you do it to a client because you're still thinking about the next person coming through the door. But you've got to, and having that time, giving that acknowledgement, like I was a child wanting to be seen.
Yeah.
And that's realistically what we all want. We all want love. We all want to be seen. We want to be heard.
Definitely. I really hope that I've managed to create that here and ensure that you are definitely seen and heard by not only myself, but our listeners as well, Nina. I could talk to you all day. And I really wish that we had way more time than 3 minutes. We should have booked this for a good 3-4 hours.
I've got like 6 stories in one of mine.
Yeah, but I tell you one thing that we really focus on at the Coaching Masters, and that is turning our adversity into an asset. If you would, and if you could, I would love to do part 2 with you, because I feel like what we've now had is the adversity, and I'm sure there's more because there's a lot of adversity in your story, but really how that is then turned into the asset and how that's then used and utilized to help people. That's part 2, I think. Would you do that? Would you come back?
Yeah, most definitely.
I would love that if you would. But thank you so much for just being open, being vulnerable, sharing, being honest. You've got a lot of light to offer the world. And I feel like as difficult as this is, and as unfair as this is, and unjust as this is, you needed to go through that darkness.
Yes, definitely.
In order for the light to really and truly shine. And you didn't deserve that. And that is really unfair. But you are the one that is able to take that and shine the light through it. And I don't think many people could have done that. I love you, Nina. I think you're an incredible person. And I think you are going to inspire a huge amount of people. As a father to a daughter, and as a husband to a wife, and as a man in general, I feel like there's a lot that I would love to learn from you, because one thing that I hugely admire about your story and hugely admire about you as a person is, as I hear your story, I feel a lot of hate. And I really admire that you at one point had said, I don't have that. And I don't hold on to that. And I feel like my place to go is to be so furious and so disgusted and so angry at the men in your life and them having treated you the way that they have as a father and as a husband. The immediate place I go there is real tense anger, but I respect that not being a thing. And I think the way forward is for that not to be a thing.
No.
And I feel like I could learn a lot from you there.
Thank you.
You're an incredible person. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you have. Can I give you a hug?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.